Good day, Tom. Thank you for joining me here with a chat with authors.
Fantastic. It's really marvelous to be invited. Thank you.
You're so welcome. First of all, let me thank you for agreeing to do this video interview with me today over Zoom. I want to let the audience know that we're doing that in case we have any transmission difficulties. I'm here in the western part of North Carolina in the United States, and you are back in jolly old England. I think you're in the Brighton area. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes. South Coast.
So I'm across the pond, so to speak. So we may have some of those kinds of issues. To get us started here, would you give us a little bit about your background in learning and development?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I started, I'll just go a little bit further than that because I've been making corporate videos since about 1987. And then I started specializing in video for learning in about 1996. And then it was called multimedia, they used to call it, which is now what we could now call e-learning. And right from the start, I was interested in drama, and that's partly what attracted me to it, because you could do little dramas in that area.
So before you got into learning and development and you were just doing videos and such, tell us a little bit about that background and what kinds of things did you do? Was it full-length movies or commercials, or what was your background? Oh,
before that, well, I started right in the very early days. When I was still actually a student, I was a video artist, but I was strangely successful as a video artist because I've been exhibited at MoMA. I've had, internationally, I had a lot of exhibits. I've had my own show in London's Institute of Contemporary Art. So I was quite successful as a video artist, but you couldn't make it. You could make some money out of it, but it's not really you basically have to become a lecturer really, and it wasn't really my thing. And so then I got into corporate, and I just did a lot of corporate. In those days, it was very hands-on. I'm sure you can recall that, with those great big U-matic tapes, which were literally this big, and in those days it was quite an obscure medium. So if you could actually press the right buttons, you had some, marketability in the first place. So I did a lot of that, as I say, and then, I was doing some training as part of it, but I think this partnership I was involved in, video production partnership, hadn't gone very well. In 1996, I just decided I'm going to retrain and try to go into this multimedia area, because that looked to be something that was burgeoning. In that time, I have done all sorts of little short films of my own, and some strange viral films and things like that. I've actually written, I think, 7 or 8 feature scripts, none of which have got made, although I have had some, I've had some interest out of it from people, like proper producers, but I haven't actually made anything. But what I discovered recently is that it's all the time I've been doing that, all my sort of adult life, it's suddenly all that learning actually has added up to something that I can apply in the L&D sector. So there we go, it's counted for something.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for that background. So let's shift over now to our main event, which is a focus on your book, Watch and Learn. I would hold it up, but I've got the Kindle version of it. And every time I try to hold up a Kindle and show people the screen, they can't see it. So if you've got, there it is. All right, Watch and Learn. So
there we go.
I can't remember exactly how I came across your book. I think it may have been Donald Clark that mentioned it, but I purchased it because I was intrigued by what it was covering. And I have a little bit of a background on that, but there's no need to go into all that stuff. So to start us off here, my 3-part question to you is, who did you write it for? Why did you write it? And what do you hope the takeaways are for our audience? So tackle that any way you wish.
Okay. Who for? I wrote it for, I think I wrote it for fundamentally really for learning designers, but you could take that up to someone at a sort of more executive level who's looking to commission something and has to have a sort of a high concept of a design, if you like, because it sheds light on what the function of video drama is, and that's all tied in with your basic concept of what you're going to use it for. And the why is basically because after I'm now 63, so I've been doing this for many, many years, and all this time I've been, dreaming about doing these fantastic films and everything. And it's always been a bit frustrating. And then it's only taken me till now to realize, stupidly. And then this was partly because of COVID. And so I had some time to reflect, really, why should anyone in learning know about drama? They might know a little bit about video. They might, they know something about learning theory, perhaps. But drama is a very specific thing. But actually, there's a lot of it produced. It's the most expensive form of video. But over the years, I've made a lot of sort of poor scripts, and really, it costs the same to make a good script as a bad script. And I thought, well, obviously, there's an answer to this, and that is just sharing the basic knowledge. And so I thought, well, let's just write a little book, which has got the sort of the fundamentals in it. So, and I would say I could go on a bit about the sort of basic takeaways then, if you like.
Oh, please.
So really, just to start with, one of the main things, there's a bit of a confusion between drama and other kinds of video that occur in learning. I suppose there's role plays or sims, and I say they're distinct from drama in their way. They may look similar because you've got people talking to each other, but they're really just enacting something that is, how can I put it? It's not designed to work on you psychologically. It's more designed just to be, almost like watching you assemble something. It's that kind of a notion. But drama is much more about, it's not really for communicating procedural semantic content. It's more to do, but it can just communicate a little bit of that with a great retention, actually, because it works emotionally. But really what it does is it shines light on things and helps you think about things. So the person I'm most interested in this respect at the moment is, I could hold up another book, is I'm sure you know about this one, which actually Donald Clark drew my attention to, Mary Helen Imordino Yang, and her, she's an effective learning theorist and researcher, and she says, there's been so much historically in learning theory and research to do with the retention of semantic kind of information, that emotion has been thought of as, she said, it's been thought of a bit like a child running around in a china shop. But she says her metaphor goes on to say that rather than that, the emotions are more like the shelves that hold up the porcelain, with the porcelain being the cognition. So in other words, we need an emotional framework for our learning. And one of the key concepts within that is what she calls, I like this idea of transcendent thinking, which is really the moment when you start to, okay, I've learned this, now I've got to integrate it with, what I did last week, what I learned on that course, my understanding of the moral issues, what Fred's going to say if I suddenly start to do that instead of that, So that is precisely what drama is good for, is stimulating these moments of transcendent contemplation. Obviously, if you don't have it, you give people learning and they will give their own structure, but that structure could be, oh, that learning's it's just a load of rubbish, they're just making me learn that because I need to. So one of the they're making me because for legal reasons, for example. So one of the things that you can do is say, well, what would happen if I didn't do it in the real world? And then you bring them into a hypothetical moment where they have to consider that. So I would say, I've got
what I liked about it was that it shares with people, your book, on how to really emotionally engage the audience. And while that's not appropriate for every type of learning and development video, I think if you're going to try to convey something that's more moral or compliance wise or safety wise, I think that there's this is an important approach to this, and I had, I don't know, I'd never seen or read a book that kind of really addressed this head on, and I found your book very accessible. It was an easy read and very insightful, gave a lot of good directions and all of that. But so you came upon this because you were reflecting on all of this during COVID, a slow period for many of us. So what are some of your additional thoughts about that what you personally gained from this experience of writing this book?
I think, well, one thing is, yes, it did force me to, look at my own understanding, and whilst I had a good understanding, it helped me sort of join it all up, if you like. And I think even since the book, I've been talking about it, and I feel, obviously teaching is a great way of learning, as I'm sure you appreciate. And so, yeah, I've learned more, and I've learned a deeper understanding. And I think also I've learned to be a bit sort of stronger. I think is one of the things I was hoping in, sort of unconsciously, perhaps, be able to sort of say, no, you can't do that. You've got to do this. Otherwise, frankly, it's a waste of your time and money, and just maybe a bit bolder about that kind of thing, really.
Well, I agree. And that's probably a message that needs to be conveyed, because it is an expensive thing to do video. And if you're going to do this, do it for the right reasons, and then do it correctly. Okay, let's shift over to the book itself here. In any way that you would like to approach this here, can you kind of walk us and our audience through what you're addressing in the book? I mean, you can't give it all away here, but can you give us the highlights and go through the chapters, perhaps? Yeah,
well, I've just got a little note. I've just cut and pasted. At the end of every chapter, there's learning points, and I've just got a little document here with all those learning points. So I'll pick out some of those as we go through. So what is drama is the first chapter, and one of the things that comes out in that area, I think, is that drama's concerns that one place to get good subjects for drama, areas to make into a drama, is what I call the grey area, which is just that overlap of public and private at work. An obvious, not an obvious example. I think the kind of example I use in the book is, if supposing you've seen a colleague and they are behaving non-compliantly in some small way. Now, that might be a little thing, but then, if you tell on them, as it were, you might get them in trouble. You see that they may be having some personal problems of some sort, but then you kind of realize by your going along with it that actually this is getting serious, and whatever it is could have blowback on you. That is a sort of a classic grey area. And of course, that could be to do with compliance. It could do with mental health issues, anything. But I'm just saying, this thing to do with, in the work world, we are emotional people, but we have to follow rules. And at some point, those rules bang up against our sort of personal understanding. And so apart from the fact it's good to construct drama on that, it gives you good fertile ground for drama. It's a good place to sort of test your ideas. If you want someone to think deeply about the idea, where is that idea going to find a limit? Where is it going to be dodgy, difficult to apply? And then it makes you think about the essence of that idea. So that's kind of really how that works. That's the main tip from what is drama, apart from the parts I've already said, that it's not role play. Mm-hmm. I suppose the other thing is, it's an array of techniques that allow us to model human behavior. That's kind of how I sum it up. And then so the next chapter is, what's the role of drama in workplace learning? What have I got there? I'll just quickly look at my own notes. So, well, we've said it stimulates you to really to be able to have discussions about difficult subjects. There's also this history about this notion from anthropology that storytelling is a kind of an evolved tool to manage large groups. That's I've forgotten the name of the flipping anthropologist now who said that, and you probably are aware of it. I think another key concept is that watching drama seems passive because at home we watch it for enjoyment and it's relaxing, but it only is dramatic if you are active in your viewing. And that's because what the drama is saying to you is, here's the situation, it's a difficult situation, it's a challenging situation, what would I do in that situation? And that's where you're active. And you may not, what's quite exciting about drama, I think, is for a learning perspective, is that if you do it nicely, your audience is very active, but they're hardly aware that they're active. It's sparking off all sorts of thoughts. And yeah.
Yeah, they're cognitively engaged, I think, is that you pull people in and they are drawn to this. They're thinking about it, paying attention to it. They're not maybe physically active, but there's a lot going on cognitively and that's where I think you really engage them emotionally.
Yeah. And in a learning structure, you can follow that up, obviously, you can relate that back to more rules-based learning. So it's a sort of balance between those two.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things you said in the book, is that, this can augment other means of learning, and it's, not a standalone necessarily, but can, be sandwiched in between other modes of learning, and but maybe to draw home some of the points from something earlier, or to preface something that's going to come on later on in the learning progression.
Right. Yeah. So, the next chapter I've written is dialectical storytelling, and that's about the dialectic, which is because a lot of people, I think, write story just with this notion of this is what happened, whereas really it's much more about the dialectic. So this happened followed by this happened, which gives you one idea presented, another idea presented, gives you a third idea put into your mind. And I just quote the famous Soviet filmmaker Lev Kuleshov, who did this experiment when he showed a guy with a sort of uninflected expression, and then he cut that with first a bowl of soup, and he asked people what they thought his expression was, and they said hunger, and then it was a gorgeous woman reclining on a chaise lounge, and they said it was lust or desire. So this is something that's quite fundamental to filmmaking, that I think a lot of people actually forget about. It's so fundamental to the medium. The power of it is often overlooked. And drama produces meaning by mainly showing conflict between characters, and in that, a scene is less about dialogue as it is about the message that, what goes underneath the so-called subtext. In other words, the emotional meaning of that conflict. Yeah. So then the next chapter is character. So, and then I say a little bit. I think I'll start off with saying something like, if a tree falls in a forest, what's the, that's a classic thing. It's obviously if there's no one there to hear it, is there a sound? Well, that's the same as this character and story. You don't have a drama or a story or events until you've got a character to relate those events through. So what your character is doing is bringing meaning to your subject matter. So you design your character with that in mind. Another little idea is that there's two sort of levels of character. There's characterization, which is about the superficial elements, which is maybe, what someone looks like, their ethnicity, whether they're sort of jolly or, inhibited. Whereas the sort of deeper character is more about their actions when presented with difficult decisions. So those are character defining elements reflected in story events. I think then once again, one of the most interesting things about character, I think, in learning, that is also often not really thought of, is that really drama is, fundamentally it's pro-diversity, because if you think about it, you can watch people empathise with. Oh golly, who's that guy in Silence of the Lambs? Hannibal Lecter, for example. I'm not recommending it. I'm merely saying, it's very fundamental to drama to make you empathic with a character, and you don't necessarily have to like that character. And so, that whilst the superficial elements of representing diversity are important, that they're not as important as the very nature of drama itself in that function, I'd say. And then I suppose the only other sort of quick thing to say about drama character is that most drama is about conflict between a protagonist and an antagonist, and you definitely need conflict in a drama, or it's not a drama. It's an exposition. So then from there, I go into story and just lay out some of the sort of, his story's very kind of fundamental, isn't it? Almost, how can I put it? The problem with story is that a lot of airy-fairy stuff is spoken about it, but when you write down to the nuts and bolts of it, it's actually pretty simple. I think story, and in fact the whole sort of dramatic technique, I would compare it to chess in that once you learn the rules are simple, but you can become a lifetime becoming a master. So I lay out the sort of the 3-act structure and how that's broken down. I think what you said, the summary of describing a story is a narrative about a character dealing with an obstacle to achieve some important goal. And then essentially a story is, beginning, middle, and end, which is set up. I can't remember what the middle bit's called now, and resolution. But what happens really is that characters are faced with, first you have to have exposition to set up the world. Then something comes along and disturbs that world. And then the character spends the rest of the time trying to put that world right. And every time they try and put something right, it gets harder and harder until they're faced with an ultimate decision, which is the point at which you'll get the most insight into your subject matter. So that is the standard structure of a story. The useful thing about learning development is that you can put a lot of the exposition part, the context for the story, perhaps into the e-learn, or you may choose, for example, to depict a situation which is very well known to the people that you're addressing. So you can get the story going very quickly, really. And that's essentially what we have to do in this arena anyway, because that's what people demand is, I want everything's got to be short nowadays, doesn't it? So, yeah. So what I really try and do is just get, I spent a lot of time just trying to get down to the very essence and say, what are the really fundamental design elements that you need, and that's what I've tried to lay out in the book. Then there's a bit about text. So that's in 2 parts, which is dialogue and description. With dialogue, the main tips are, you write the dialogue after you've designed the story. You've got to make sure you read your dialogue aloud, and absolutely don't put learning points into the mouths of the characters. This is something that you often hear. Oh yes, I thought that about CX5PO compliance rule. I knew that was a bad idea to apply that in this instance. These kinds of things, are very poor viewing, and people will quickly turn off. And obviously, we need exposition. Exposition can be dramatized. And one example I used in the book was about James Bond, actually, because if you think about this, in James Bond, of course, they've got a lot of exposition that needs to be got across to do with gadgets. And when you look at the early From Russia with Love, I think it is, yes, it is that one. Q shows him a case, which has got an exploding talcum powder thing in with some gas in it. And if you watch that old clip now, it's very much like a sort of standard 1980s training film. They just say, you've got to make sure you turn the handles this way or the gas will explode in your face. And then by the time it got to Goldfinger, they just had Bond answering back a bit. So when Q says, and if you press, whatever you do, don't press that button because there's an ejector seat. And Bond says to him, ejector seat, you're joking. And he says, I never joke about my work, 007. And then if throughout the whole series, these characters become developed so that you get a sort of, Bond becomes like the naughty schoolboy and Q becomes the tough prof, as I call him. And then that antagonism makes the exposition dramatized. So there's a little example there. And then when it comes on to I'll talk about description as well. I mean, that's a bit highfalutin in a way to talk about now, but I suppose the main thing is that video description aims to evoke the feeling of watching a film, and that's what you try to do. I think you need to leave a bit of room in it for the director to do their work, I think, and the actors as well. So I think that's the sort of high point. There's a chapter about formatting, and this is something I've had a lot of problems with over the years, that people don't pay attention to formatting at all. Of course, they've come from in L&D. You don't even call it a script, you call it a storyboard, which means something different to a filmmaker, of course. So, but the key elements of the filmmaking formatting are really just, they're instructions for use when you're filming. So it is actually really important to try and stick to these. So just simple things that often get overlooked are people won't put what they call a slug line, which is the heading that says, interior office day. That's an important thing, and those are often left off, or they may be described in a variety of ways so that you can't follow through the script that you're talking about the same place. And similar with character names, they should always be consistent, and and then sometimes basic description is inferred, whereas it has to be completely there. So it's these kind of things which are, I feel like a terrible pedant saying that, when I work with my clients, but often, obviously, of course, we're writing the scripts, but one has to insist on it, because otherwise, it's just like an e-learning script. You don't, if you can't follow the instructions, mistakes are made. So,
yeah, no, I thought there were a lot of good hints in there about, working with professionals. This is what they're expecting from you, and this is how you can go about giving them what they need, so that there's not a miscommunications or a lack of communications about, some of the intent, whether it's an interior or exterior or the same day or not. But I thought that was very, very helpful.
And then I do. There's also, this is followed by a 1-page chapter, because I found it so important. I didn't know what else the chapter to put it in, but it's script review. And this is just because I've got a lot of experience of when people review e-learning scripts, it's common to send them to a kind of committee, which might be all over the place, stakeholders, and they'll all make a comment and they may track changes. You just can't do that with a drama script. It has to be comments only, and the comments have to be interpreted, because otherwise what happens is people start to rewrite dialogue, and dialogue, as I've already explained, is only working on a sort of, there's a tension between what's said and what's intended, because it's sort of working on a subconscious level. So it's obviously, one honors the intent of the comments, but you can't just allow people to sort of willy-nilly rewrite dialogue. It's very, very, very tricky. So yeah,
No, I think that's important. I so fully agree with that. That you get too many cooks in the kitchen, so to speak, and they're gonna take things that you meant to be subtle and they're gonna make it too explicit and try to guide the dialogue too much and not leave it. You need to leave those things to the director. You need to give them something to work with and not be so explicit with that.
Exactly. Yeah. So then there's a chapter called The Real World L&D, and that's really looking at, what are the actual forms that you tend to come across of drama in L&D. And those are really mainly short standalone clips, shorter clips from a longer story, short clips from a longer story arranged in a branching course. And then I guess we could go back to this idea of this transcendent thinking. I mean, I think the global sort of notion is that really these little drama clips that we're making are really there to trigger off some deeper thought about the learning that you can guide with your more standard kind of exposition-based learning that's around it. I think that's generally how drama is used in learning. Yeah. I mean, I could say more about that, but I think that's pretty straightforward, really. But I do give some good examples I think about how to use it. I guess one more thing I could say is that if you are using a series of clips in a course, it's usually advantageous to try to have a single set of characters and perhaps a single story, because that's more, it's kind of, you get more leverage from it if you can design it in that way. Because, for example, once you set up the characters, you don't have to set them up again. And you can have things in the first clip that may resonate into the second clip and so forth. So, you can get more sort of depth into the drama, and therefore into the sort of attention that you're trying to focus. So the next chapter is called Foregrounding and Commentary. So, which is about, you can in fact incorporate commentary and semantic kind of learning into dramas, and there's various ways that this is done, and a lot of them are, funny enough, are present in comedy, and a lot of them, Brecht was famous for pointing them out when he talked about the alienation effect, which a lot of people learn about in drama theory, and what that is really is breaking the fourth wall when you talk to the audience. So how can I put it? You've got, there is just that, literally a character will break the fourth wall and talk to the audience. There's inner voices. You could have captions sort of giving you what people are really thinking. Actually, a flashback is a kind of foregrounding, because it's you're kind of giving a commentary and an exposition on a scene that's already a story that's already happened. Even actually comedy itself is a commentary. So even if you just have a sort of comedic style of acting, even that in a way is commenting, because comedy is fundamentally criticism. So you're sort of, how can I put it? You are within the performance is a commentary. It's quite difficult to explain that, but it's, if you think about it, that is true. So I go into those. I break down all those techniques in a pretty, just a few pages really. But there's a lot there, and people do use this a lot. I think the one thing I find, I could just talk about a peccadillo, which is literal point of view, and literal point of view is a foregrounding technique, which you see it a lot in e-learning, but I think people mistakenly take it for the notion that if you put the camera in the position of the protagonist, you're going to automatically get greater empathy with that character. and at the same time, you're going to solve a lot of diversity issues because you can't see the protagonist, unless they have their hands coming in or something. But that's a fundamental misunderstanding of the medium, because, as I've said, drama is already fundamentally sort of pro-diversity in the way it empathizes with people. But you never see this first-person thing, and very, very rarely in a Hollywood film, which is about creating empathy and getting in people's heads. And the reason is because it's a foregrounding thing. So what it does is it pushes you away and it makes you see the thing and sit in a more critical position. And that is something that you can use to your benefit in learning, but it's not the other thing, which is, this notion of immersion. So, so that the next bit is the branching scenarios, which is, I've got to say, I think they're really tough. They're really hard to do, but I try to give as much help as I can there. Funny enough, I talk a little bit about these foregrounding techniques because you can use they're quite good in that, because the thing about interactive stuff is that you're kind of balancing this feeling, that this notion of being sitting back and watching it and being absorbed in it at the same time. So that's the sort of the art, is to keep people in those, jumping between those two positions. And obviously when they have to make a comment, you're making them stand back, but equally you want them to get into that headspace so you can make them think about the dilemmas and challenges that they're watching in the drama. And there's various ways that you can help yourself with that. One is to sort of like put all your, maybe you might have a linear bit at the beginning to set up the story. You want to keep the clips as short as possible to sort of, so that there's, you speed up the interactivity. The interactivity has to be not involved, it has to be very simple. Yes, no is ideal, really. Yes, no, perhaps, I suppose. You don't want to be thinking about, don't have to be sort of thinking in that space for too long. You want to be able to just have a quick response and then go straight on. And also, you can't have too many learning points. If you design it with too many learning points, you're never going to be able to map them. If you map a few, you'll find that a lot more spontaneously arise as you sort of write your story to fit. So try to be, what's the word, conservative there. Another little thing is that if you make the questions, some people are very into competitiveness and gamification and all this stuff. That doesn't really work very well in interactive, because it means, there's a greater likelihood of people are just going to take the right route. And you don't want them to just take the right route. You want them to explore the whole thing, if nothing else, just because you've paid to have that bit of video made and you want them to watch it. Plus, of course, people do learn from incorrect examples. So, you've got to try and be a bit more playful in the way that you design the kind of the interactivity, I guess. Yeah. So then we're on to costs is the next chapter. Well, so I think a lot of people don't know perhaps that we base filming on units of days, because pretty much everything that you hire in for your filming, like the cast, the equipment, the locations, the technicians, they all charge you by the day. So you bring them all together in a unit of a day, and you sort of, obviously you can have a bigger or a smaller load of technicians, which sort of is one of the ways to sort of measure your production values, how glossy it looks. But essentially you're looking at these units of filming days, and then you kind of want to design it around what you can film in a day. Then the next most important thing really is the size of the cast. And you don't really necessarily even think of how many casts you've got, but you think of actor days. In other words, for each day an actor is on set, they've got not only got a fee, but they'll have, costume costs, food costs, travel costs, and so forth. So you may have 6 actor days over 2 days, which might mean that you have 5 actors on one day and 1 actor on the other day, or 3 and 3, or 2 and 4, whatever. But that's, cost units that you work with. And another important one is setup. So if we're setting up a little locus of filming around this desk, that takes us, 20 minutes, half an hour to set it up or something. We then film a few shots around there, even if it's different angles. You've got your basic lighting set up. And then you have to break all that down if you're going to go over and film on that desk. So another floor or another building, these things take time. So they're effectively downtime. So if you're filming, 2 people in one location, in one story day, it's another thing I didn't mention, but, that's on a different day in the narrative, you'd get there, they'd change clothes and stuff. That would be very cost effective, but it would be not very exciting. And you may have so many lines in the day, you may not even be able to remember the lines, but you could get a lot out of that. And the more, every time you add another character, you've got to have more angles. Every time you move it, it takes longer and so forth. So those are the sort of core things. But I do list quite a few more of these sort of fundamental cost elements, and obviously one has to design to a cost. So that's why it's important to know that.
No, I think these are all very helpful points, I think, for somebody to think through in terms of what are the implications of what script they've written or storyboard they've created, because you can so easily add to your costs. And it's that balance that you're trying to achieve between, managing your cost, your budget, versus, creating more interest. As you said, not having the characters in one setting, that can get kind of boring. Good advice.
I think one thing I didn't actually put in the book is that sometimes we've had a thing when, I remember we've done something quite recently with someone dreamt up something with so many characters, but it was 3 storylines. So we said, well, you could get the characters from one storyline. If you sort of play with your casting a bit more, this actor could play this character as well in the other storyline, and so forth. So then you've got less actor days, but you still have quite a lot of characters, but you have to sort of, you merge the characters, you change the descriptions of the characters so that they match up physically. So that's one pragmatic response to that kind of thing. So the next chapter's filming, what happens on set, and that's really a description about how a film set runs. It's a hierarchy. The producer oversees the management of the project. The director's in charge of how the films are, the scenes are filmed. And I go into the other functions. What's a director of photography? That's really a lighting, camera person at this sort of level of production, sound, hair and makeup, all that, what the functions of them all and how they're going to help you, how much you need them. And there's a little bit in there about how directors work, which I think is useful to know, which is just that directors, it's an easy tip, directors only, and I'm a director, we only ever use 3 things to direct an actor. That's active verbs. So that would be attacking, defending, apologizing, and so forth. Adjustments, which is to do with attitude. So you might say, okay, it's as if you're talking to your headmaster and you've just, hit another boy in the playground or something like that. So that's an adjustment. And an exploration of contextual meaning, which could be you've just come from another meeting and you've had to run here and you're out of breath, or it could be just an explanation of what these terms are, or the sort of the bigger meaning of the scene. That's sort of background, if you like, but it can change the performance quite a bit. Editing's the next one, but to be honest, editing, I don't really say too much about editing, because if you've got all your other stuff right, the editing sort of does itself. But I'm exaggerating, but what you're really doing, isn't it, is designing a bespoke jigsaw. So therefore, it's going to fit together nicely if you've done the first part of the bit well. But really what we do say is that when you cut a scene, you're not just going from one person talking to another person talking, you're trying to tell the story of the emotional interaction. So sometimes you're on a person listening, or sometimes you might be on something that they're looking at, which is significant in the story. So that's essentially what happens in the edit. I suppose there's a little bit about grading, which is, most people know what that is nowadays. It's essentially, adjusting the contrast and color to make it look nice or give it some kind of effect. I'm almost at the end of the book now, so I've got science notes. I'm not any kind of a learning design theorist, so I just put in a few things that I kind of have found and clung on to, if you like. I do try to inform my practice with, reading about these, the research and stuff. And actually, I've got to say, give Donald Clark his due. That series he's just done with John Helmer is absolutely amazing, isn't it? About the history of the learning designers, and that's a great, very useful. So, I mean, the Ebbinghaus thing, you forget 50% of the only thing you learn within an hour. I think why that's actually, I'll just return to that because does it just, if you sort of play around with it a bit, it gives you a bit more reason to do drama or to think about drama, because even with ordinary video, it's got this idea, the thing about if you watch a video, it may be good to see something clearly, so it's an explainer video, but you do tend to forget that very quickly. So this is one reason to make drama dramatic, is that you won't forget it so easily because it will be emotionally engaging. So whilst people want to sort of try, there's because I think learning designers, exposition is one of the sort of default modes of a learning designer, isn't it? Instruction. Therefore, I think there's a sort of quite an urge to say, I've got to stick everything into this flipping video. Let's just remember, for this little jewel that you're creating, these are the things that are going to hammer home, and you're going to remember them. They're going to be key points if you can make a little story about them. And it's just, it's folly to try and put exposition in there very much, because, it's not the best use of the medium. If you do watch an instructional video, then you would have to, in order to remember it, you'd want to watch it again, do another exercise about it, and so forth. But maybe with drama you can have a bit of a bang, and a few things will sink in quite deeply. And yeah, I guess the other stuff, I've written a little bit about the Helen Imaldino Yang. There's some the stuff about the Make It Stick guys. I've forgotten their names. About which particularly applies to branching scenarios. So that's about effortful learning, makes for better retention. That's one of the reasons that branching scenarios work. So I think I've just, apart from the case studies at the end, that's my summary of of the chapters there.
Well, thank you for all of that. I'm just thinking here about this last part that you talked about, because I remember when I got into the instructional design business, they said, this isn't a murder mystery. Tell us that the butler did it, and then tell us exactly how he did it. Now, this is flipping this 180 degrees to where we don't want to be so explicit and say the butler did it, and this is how he did it. It wasn't the maid, it was the butler. And so you want that drama, that mystery, that to be more emotionally engaging. And then, as you say, then you're less likely to forget it quickly, because that story that emotionally engaged you will stick with you longer. But you have some case studies in the book. Can you give us one quickly? Tell us, kind of whatever were the key parts of one of your experiences here in creating drama for learning and development?
Yep. I don't know I'm just wondering for this. I'm not even sure whether to say a new one that isn't in the book. What do you think, Guy?
Anything you want to do?
Okay. No, there's an interesting one we did quite recently for an engineering company, and they what had happened is they'd done a big contract and they accidentally sold an app with they'd sort of bundled it in with the whole contract. And in fact, what they should have done was withhold that and because then they could have sold it on separately and they should have licensed it. And this is something that we had to teach someone, and they said to us, well, we want that moment when someone just suddenly realizes, oh my gosh, we've made this terrible mistake. And so we kind of wound that back and said, actually, no, that'll only last a moment. It's not really a scene, so it won't be memorable. So what we did was we took those two people out of that team, and they had to go to the client and ask for the rights back. So that was a sort of, that was the headmaster's office scene. And obviously that's completely excruciating, but they have to go through the exposition, literally the exposition, but it's not even, the exposition even literally said, because they're trying to, everything is like euphemistic, so you as a viewer, you're doing a lot of work because you're filling in what they really mean. And at the same time, empathizing with them. And, of course, that's very memorable. But it's just a really simple thing, but you swap it around like that, you've got a good drama.
Excellent story. I like that. So, Tom, where can our audience find your book, Watch and Learn?
It's on Amazon. You can just get it on Amazon. It's an ampersand. I think there's other funny things that, it's not that, it's a niche piece, so you may have to put my name as well to ensure you get it, or put book, certainly. Yeah.
Well, I will put the links to the Amazon source for your book in the show notes to this YouTube video here, and I will also include that in the blog post that I will put out tomorrow to introduce this video that we're doing. But do you have any final words of wisdom to people in the learning and development world that want to get into drama? What can you sum up here quickly for them?
Oh God, I haven't just noticed that you've asked me that, but so I think what would I say? I think the thing is to have faith in it, and look for conflict and difficult decisions about things. The more time you can spend in decision making, showing decision making, or showing situations in which maybe they should make a decision but don't make a decision because it's too difficult, those are the things that will engage your audience imaginatively. I guess that's what I'd say. So just go for that.
Tom, thanks again so much for spending this time with me. And I highly encourage the people in the learning and development business to check out your book, Watch and Learn, so they can consider how they might use drama in video in learning and development. But thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you, Guy. Great to talk to you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.